Have you been thinking about producing your own one person show? Well, my guest today, Merit Kahn, has done just that. She's gone from selling out her show in Denver to bringing it to other venues in the United States. So find out how she did it in today's episode. Hello, dreamers. Welcome to the Late Starters Club, giving you the inspiration, mindset, and tools you need to start something midlife and beyond. Remember, it's never too late to follow your dreams. Hello, Late Starters. It's your host, Andrea Vall, and I am here with the amazing Merit Kahn. So, you guys, I'm so excited for this interview because I have known Merritt for a long time now. She is a fellow speaker friend of mine, but she is getting out there and doing creative things in a bigger way. She's also on our Moms Unhinged show that we do. So she's speaker, comedian, but let me actually read her official bio because it's so good and she's got so many things she does. So Americon performs on 3 stages: keynotes for conferences, one woman shows in theaters, and comedy sets in clubs. She's a producer, writer, entrepreneur, certified speaking professional, world traveler, mom, and terrible cook. I want people to know that you wrote that. I did not write that.
Yes. Well, it's true. Not perfect.
So I am so excited to talk, especially about your one woman shows, because I think that's just such a fascinating thing that you've been doing and you've been having such great success with it. So we're going to dive deeper into what it takes to launch a one woman show. And you are, midlife here, and I think there's probably a lot of people that have this idea of a show being in them and wanting to perform. So what prompted you to start this and write this and produce this?
Well, first let me say midlife is a little bit optimistic, Andrea. I don't quite think I'll make it to 106, but okay, you never know.
I think so.
And besides the fact that I wanted to be on your podcast and I had to start something late in my life in order to do that, I I think, when I started studying comedy back in 2014, it was really to be more deliberately funny for my keynotes that I was doing. And my primary business was keynote speaking at conferences on sales and leadership topics. And a funny thing happened once I did my first comedy set. I really fell in love with that. And I thought, oh,
Yeah.
I got to do that more. So the show actually grew up out of idea. A friend of mine said, what are the 50 things you want to do before you are 50 years old? And I started writing my list of 50 things, but there were only 2 things on my list. And one was travel back to Southeast Asia where I had been when I was 25, and the other was write and perform a one-woman show. And I had never had that conscious thought before, but all of a sudden it's
Right.
staring at me on this page and I'm like, "Wait, what is this?" And I looked
What? Sorry, how did this get here?
yeah, like, I had no idea. It was so strange, but I knew once I wrote that on the paper, I just stared at the page and I was like, "Oh, I don't need 48 other things. I just want that." And then I just started writing, and I really thought that my show was gonna be a one-time thing, really a truly a celebration of my birthday with my friends and kinda
Yeah.
rehashing my life story, but I was telling it through the lens of comedy.
Mhm.
And after I did the show, I thought, "Oh, yeah, I that is not a one-time thing." That was too much fun. And so now I'm
Yeah.
just, figuring out how to do it for my life.
Yeah, and I just wanna take a pause because, first of all, she says, "I just thought I'd perform it for some of my friends." Yeah, 350 of her friends. She sold out 2 shows back to back, Friday and Saturday night. I went to it, it was amazing, and I just think it was just incredible. I was just blown away by your show. I was like, "Oh, let's go support Merit," and then I was like, "Oh, crap, that was so good."
Aw, thank you. Yeah, everybody should, check out my promo video because Andrea is the first up saying how much she loved it.
I forgot
You're
that.
famous in my promo video.
It was so good, it was. So that is really cool, and, how long did that take from idea to getting that produced? I know it, was at the end of the year. Did you have that idea, like, early in the year. How long what was the process there?
It was a year. It took a
Mhm.
year. The first 9 months I filled with procrastination. Pretty much thought about it, talked about it, wrote about it, dreamed about it, and did
Uh-huh.
nothing to create it. And then it was one of those people, like, those people you have in your life, and once you tell them you're gonna do something, if you don't do it, you'll look bad to them, and you don't wanna look
Ugh.
bad to that particular person.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
told one of those kinds of friends that I was gonna do this show, and then as soon as
Right.
I heard the words come out of my mouth, I was like, "Oh, crap, I just told Tracy, now I have to do it." And that, put a little bit of pressure on me, and so I I function well like that on deadlines and, social pressure, so I started talking it into existence, and the next thing I
Mhm.
knew, I I booked a theater. I did it all backwards. I booked the theater, I put up the web page, I described the show all before I finished writing it. I know I'm not exactly proud to say that out loud, but that is the truth. But I knew I couldn't do this alone. So I recruited my dear friend and absolutely wonderful comedic talent, Karen Ruth White. And she has worked with me for many years on my keynote business. But I said, "Hey, I've got this idea and I want to write this show." And she was my co-writer and literally workshopped every single word of that show with me. And so I think when you have a big goal, a big dream like that, the for me, what I've learned over the course of my life is that things happen faster and the product is better when I collaborate with other people.
Mhm. Yeah, and I love what else you did with this here is you started getting it out into the world before it was ready.
Yeah,
And, that just gives it momentum. And, I think if you wait to write it, you know, sometimes that book or that play or that whatever it is doesn't get written. And
right.
so by almost launching it before you're ready, you know, you're you've got a date there. You've got the momentum to get it done because it has to get done. So I
Yeah.
love that, and I also love that you told someone about it too, that first person, because that's huge too, and it just helps with accountability. So I think the way you did it was perfect.
Well, thank you. Well, now there's, to put a little bit more social pressure, I eventually see this show as a Broadway musical played by Sutton Foster. You know, my dream is to sit in the back of the theater and watch my life on stage performed by like a real trained actor. I think that would be amazing. So we'll see. You heard it here first, everyone.
Yeah. Hey, put it out there. Put it out
Anyone
there in
knows
the
Sutton,
universe.
let me know.
That's great. Well, I also want to talk about, and now the cool thing too is you're taking this to Chicago, you're taking it to New York. I mean, that is huge to go from performing it here in Denver with this, group of people to taking it other places. And that's truly amazing. And
Thanks.
it's great to see how you've made that happen. But I want to first talk about how you renamed it. So when it launched in Denver, it was called the Book of Merit. And now it's called Who Chiseled That?
Yeah.
So
You
talk
know,
about that
that
a little, that decision.
Yeah. So when I performed the show in 2019, truly for my 50th birthday as a one time only thing, Book of Merit was fine because
Mhm,
it was about me, right? It was
mhm,
my celebration, my friends. It was that was the purpose.
mhm,
Since then, I've really come to see and hearing people's experiences after they've been in the audience, it was so much more than my little story. It's really a
mhm,
relatable look at life's ups and downs and how every one of us can really rewrite our past to rewire our future. And when I really thought about it, Book of Merit is it's a little narcissistic if we're all honest with each other, but it was about me, and because the show is about so much more than my story, it really needed a bigger name. It needed something that
mhm,
could be what I hope to be kind of an iconic phrase.
mhm,
Who chiseled that is really the expression of anytime somebody tells you something isn't possible, you kinda ask yourself, "Well, who chiseled that over the door?
Yeah.
Who carved that in stone?" is sort of my
Right.
version of that or my father's
Right.
version of that. And
Yeah.
and I think it's a good little just a quick three-word trigger that reminds us, like, "Nope, maybe it could go another way. Maybe there's another possibility here." And I think really that's the purpose of this podcast. Like, you don't have to keep going the way that you're going. You could start something late in life. Like, who chiseled that? That's not
Mhm.
possible. And I think
Mhm.
that's really, the essence of why I changed the name because it's about so much more than my life story. It's an opportunity to look at your own life, your own narrative, and and really find the new opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. And that theme comes up throughout the show, and it's just it's so great. So great. So cool. I love that. I love that renaming. So, you performed this for the first time when you were 50. It was your actual birthday, wasn't it? One of those days? One of the, yeah.
My birthday is actually December 2nd, so the show was November 22nd,
Oh yeah.
so
Okay. It was
a
right
little
before.
bit
Yeah.
before.
Okay. Okay, good. How do you think, launching and doing this show was easier later in life than it might have been, when you were 20s? Because, younger, whatever. How do you think being older contributed to this success there?
I think in my 20s, I can remember, like, really hustling. I was in radio advertising sales was my first career, and, I had something to prove, so I was constantly grinding it out and pushing, and I would just do anything and nothing. I just did so much activity. And then
Mhm,
later in life, I learned more, right? I was smarter, so I was maybe more strategic. And now launching my show, I know the importance of working my network and connecting with people and I have 30 years worth of business experience and community and relationship building. So it is faster. And
mhm,
and I've also reignited that passion that I remember having as a younger person starting in my career with something to prove, and I feel that growing again, but I have it backed up with wisdom and relationships that I can already see are providing a lot of value in starting
mhm,
something later in life.
mhm. That's awesome. I love
Can I give
that.
you a good example actually?
Yes, of
And
course.
it's with this show in New York. So this is a funny thing how this happened. So I happened to be doing a keynote for a business client on a Friday in November. And I
Uh-huh,
thought, all right, well, let me look around. I grew up not too far from that area. I've got a whole network of some of my high school friends who kind of stayed local. And it would be fun to perform in the area where I grew up because I feel like
uh-huh,
that's sort of part of my path. Well, I started cold calling theaters in Westchester County and
uh-huh,
I randomly, accidentally called this theater that I'd never been to, but it's absolutely beautiful. It's called the Manor Club of Pelham, and they I just kind of I talked with this woman and I said, I've got this show and I'd really love to. And at that time, I was thinking I would just rent the theater and do all of the work myself.
right.
And she was talking to me about, well, what they need is they're looking to build their subscriber base. And so I said, well, let's get creative. How can my show help you do what you need to do? Right. So that
Yeah,
was something I've taught people for years. Always ask, what's in it for them?
yeah,
What are they trying
right,
to accomplish? How can you help? So I ended up talking to this woman who she's the president of the theater. And then I looked her up on LinkedIn and it turns out we had already been connected in 2019. I
Oh,
had
wow.
applied she was running a women's conference, and I had applied to speak at that event. It didn't work out at that time, but I thought, "Isn't that interesting?" You know, when you talk about what did I learn earlier that I'm applying now to this new venture,
Uh-huh,
I knew how to make a cold call. I knew how to listen to what was important for someone else. I already built relationships. And she and I looked at it and she's, "Wow, we are definitely supposed to do something." And so now how it ended up working is they have hired me to do my show, to bring my show to New York, and and they're taking care of all the publicity and the ticket
Uh-huh.
sale, and all the things that a producer does that are a lot more difficult than showing up and performing in my view. And, that's where I wanna take the show. That's
Yeah.
that's what I want
Yeah.
to keep going. So it was really a matter of, she's using my show to
Yeah.
to do their, what they need to do, and it's just a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah, that is so awesome. I love that. I didn't hear that whole backstory. And you guys, I was with Merritt in Las Vegas. We were doing our World Series of Comedy event and the Moms Unhinged in Las Vegas when she found out about the New York deal coming through. It was so fun, and I didn't hear that backstory. So that's
We
so
danced around
cool.
the hotel room, it was
Yeah,
very
we're
cool.
like, "Woohoo." So cool. So, yeah, so talk about, like, the bigger vision. So you booked Chicago, that and that you're kind of responsible for filling that. New York is gonna be kind of a co-responsibility.
Yeah.
How are you looking to take it to this bigger stage next? Are you looking to travel with it? What's the big plan with what you're doing, and how does that blend into your current business?
Great questions, and to be perfectly honest, I'm still at the point where I'm figuring this out as I go along, so I think that's another, lesson that I've learned along the way is I don't have to have all the answers right out of the gate. I just have to keep moving forward and doing the next thing, and, you know, it just everything kinda leads to the next thing,
Mhm,
and not that I'm not being deliberate about it, but my vision currently is that my the 3 stages are happening simultaneously, like you said in my introduction. So, I very much love my keynote speaking business, and so my thinking is that that's since that's the real revenue generator, that's still leading the charge. So, when I get a speaking event, and normally those are booked out, at least a few months in advance, then I would look around in that area and think, well, all right, I'm near there. Is there a theater I can rent? Ideally, I would get to the point where I've got management or a booking agent, and they're finding those theaters in that 100 to 300 seat range. And then, they're building out the tour, and then I'm just showing up. That would be a
mhm,
perfect situation. I'm not
yeah,
there quite yet, but it just takes 1 or 2 people, the right people seeing the show, the right
right?
reviewers getting wind of it, and then buzzword will travel. But yeah, so it's in another instance, my mom lives in Florida, and I enjoy being in Florida in the 1st quarter of
Mhm.
the year, kind of in Colorado. So, I'm doing a little bit more deliberate action, where are the communities where I can bring my show to them and build my own tour. I'd love to tour the South, East, in the 1st quarter and just continue to perform different theaters within a
Mhm,
driving distance. So it's a little bit of building, like where do I want to be? Where am I going to be? And can I do a show when I'm there? And then where do
mhm,
I want to go? And how do I just do the outreach that I need to book the seats and book the
mhm.
theaters and sell the seats? That's kind of how it works. I'm really kind of cobbling it together.
Well, that's it, and I think that's the trick, right? Is to just relax into it and realize you don't have to have everything figured out and just take the next right step. Where are things leading you? And, clearly it's leading you to this great path. I love how New York came together and it's awesome, and I think that's a amazing way to do it is just pick places where you've got connections, you've got people, and even with what we did with the Moms Unhinged show, we just were happened to be out there and said, "Let's go do it," and then we happen to know a bunch of people who showed up to the show that I didn't even expect to know anybody at the show, and,
Yeah,
like, all these people are like, "I'm in Las Vegas. Hey, I'm in Las Vegas."
that was so fun.
I know. So that's super cool. I love that. Awesome. So the other question I always like to ask, because I think this is huge. You're like such a go-getter. You're a driven person. And I think people might look at you and say, oh, she's always on the go. You're optimistic. You got it all together. But I know that none of us are like that. None of us are immune from getting down or feeling overwhelmed. And when that's happened to you, how have you gotten your mojo back? How have you bounced back from that dip in your, energy or whatever it is?
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about, Andrea. I'm really always in a I'm just fine all the time.
All the time, just always,
Just
whoa, right there.
yeah. Well, I have optimistic personality disorder, the good news is I'm upbeat all the time, and the bad news is I'm kidding, there's no bad news. One of my favorite jokes. No,
I love
I
that
am
joke so much. So
well, it's interesting. When things aren't going well, when I'm not sure what the next step is, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I retreat, right? Those are definitely like all of us, those are not the
Mhm.
moments we are posting on Facebook and Instagram about how fantastic our lives are. In fact, I don't even respond back by text if I'm in one of those moods. Like no one will
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I'm a writer. So when I really need to process something, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I go to my journal, and
Mhm,
first of all, a lot of times I'll reread. Sometimes I'll just pull out a random journal, could be from a decade ago, and just kind of read what was on my mind at that point. Where was I? And there's definitely some themes that I've noticed over the course of my
mhm,
life, things that have consistently overwhelmed me or frustrated me or gotten me excited. And, I can remember one time, it was actually not too long ago, I went through that exercise and I reread a journal about was I was very early. God, it had to have been like the 90s, in the 90s. And I was
mhm.
so excited about this deal I just closed for the radio station I was working for. And it was like $400. It was just like nothing, but I was so excited and I was like, "Wow, that's so interesting," because later in life, smaller deals didn't excite me anymore and
Yeah.
but it was nice to relive some of the past experiences. My dad is really good about that. He has in his paper calendar, he writes down all these milestones, and I'll just get a call like on May 18th, the anniversary of my college graduation. He's 30 years ago, you graduated. I'm like, oh God, that's so but I love it.
Uh-huh.
So when I get overwhelmed, I write. It's sometimes I'll just kind of purge out all the things that I'm frustrated and overwhelmed with, and then I'll do what a comedian does, and I'll, look and say, "What's frustrating about that? What's embarrassing about that? What's funny about that?" And that's where I mine my life, my current life for, humor. And for me,
Mhm.
humor has always been, or at least more specifically when I started studying it, it really was the thing that would turn things around for me faster than
Mhm.
any therapy I've ever done for sure. Um, and so, yeah, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, that's a great strategy is how quickly
Yeah.
can I find the funny?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so great. And I love a number of things you said in there because first of all, I think it's great to look back because we can see how far we've come, first of all, and say and hopefully have some gratitude and appreciate that and appreciate our journey, but also see how many things work out.
Yeah,
It all works out in the end and everything that we thought was so devastating at the time, and of course, not to negate any feelings you have at that time, but also it builds who you are, it gives you, resilience, it gives you the ability to, navigate that situation in the future, and gives us all the wisdom we have, right?
exactly, exactly.
So, but I am such a big proponent of humor too. I think that if we can look at that lighter side of it, and then we can kind of say, wow, it's life and it's a crazy ride. And, you know, there are some things that we can laugh at even in the darkest of times. So I love that.
Well, my
And
one of my things I say a lot is, they say that tragedy plus time equals comedy, but nobody said it had to take a long time to get to funny. So I try to keep that in mind, dramatic
That's
happens,
good.
and I'm like, "All right,
That's
pretty
good. And then
soon,
you get
I get to decide how long it's gonna take before I'm laughing at this."
right, and then you get paid for your comedy and your one woman show, so in a way, we're kind of monetizing the tragedy.
There you go.
I just
Exactly.
I
Thank
feel
thank no, that's yours.
like Oh my goodness. Yeah, so it's definitely it's a good way to look at life because otherwise, what would we be doing, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's my next thing, that I'm starting as soon as this Chicago run is complete. I've been asked a few times organically by people who had seen the show, can I help them kind of rework their life through
Mhm.
comedy the way that I did mine? Not so that they're necessarily performing it as a one person show,
Right.
but just the process that I went through. And so I've developed, I haven't executed it with a group yet, but that's coming soon. But
Mhm.
the workshop is called Rewrite to Rewire, which is a terrible
Mm.
name because it's hard to say, but it's really the
Right.
essence of it. So it's really about, how can you rewrite your past to
Mhm.
rewire your future? And
Yeah.
I'll take people through the exact same exercises that I went through when I designed my show.
I love that's awesome because I think that's something that happens so often. People see what you're doing, they're like, "Oh, I wanna do that. Can you help me? How do I do that?" And so, for those of you who are listening and think that maybe you have a one-person show that you'd like to write, maybe produce, definitely make sure you connect with Merit and get on her list so that you hear about that event because I think that's going to be amazing. Merit's a great teacher. She's done a lot of training and things like that in our local speakers in our speakers association as well on writing comedy and writing and with all the experience you've had writing and producing. I think that's just going to be gold. So that's awesome. Awesome.
Mhm.
So, I wanna just before we kinda close out, there's so many things I wanna talk about, but before we close out, I wanna for people who are thinking about this one-person show, how about giving us a few tips on selling seats, on filling the show? Because 'Cause you've done a lot of different things. You're out there posting on social media, you're connecting, but share with our listeners on some of the things that have been helpful in getting that out there.
Well, definitely, I think whatever, um, unique elements are part of your show, there are probably communities around that. So there's some themes in my show. I talk about some of my days at Michigan State University, which naturally lends itself to wherever I'm performing, there's probably a Michigan State alumni club in that area.
Mm,
Reach out to
mm.
them. I was part of a sorority, Zeta Tau Alpha, so I reached out to them. I talk about being married to a narcissist. Well, that lends itself to who are the divorce attorneys, who are there are narcissist support groups, right? Like, there's people that will relate to my show, just the content of my show that
Mhm,
are natural communities. So I feel like that's one thing to do. Like, same thing that you do with Moms Unhinged, right? So what do
mhm,
we all have in common? We're all moms. We're all a little unhinged,
mhm.
like there's natural groups for that. But also I think it's just my network. So the first thing I did was I went to LinkedIn and I pulled up a list of all of my contacts that are listed as, being from Illinois, right, or the Chicago
Mhm.
area, and I sent them all a personal note and said, "Here I'm coming," and da da da, and lots of people bought tickets from that.
That's
Then
awesome.
and I have a family and so that means that all of my family, individually are popular. So,
Mhm,
who can you bring with you to the show?
mhm.
So, I feel, there's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I figure there's gotta be 2 or 3 degrees of you are connected with somebody who knows somebody in Chicago. So, that's
Yeah.
kind of how I've been doing it.
Yeah.
If only I knew somebody who was good at Facebook ads and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, so that's the thing that I think people don't realize is just really doing the legwork, the groundwork, really getting into that personal invitation, I think is huge. Because I do a lot I've kinda lean a little bit heavily on the ads, which is, the paid tool and I've doesn't always work exactly the way you want it to. So I like that you've got to use a multi-pronged approach when you're trying to sell
Oh, yeah.
seats for sure. So
And there's also
that is
press releases and,
Mhm.
event listings and different things like that, but ultimately, it's hard,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, and people wait to the last minute to buy. It's very nerve-wracking, I will say that, so
Yes, it is. So, yeah, that's crazy. So, if you're
Yeah,
listening,
yeah.
yeah, and Chicago is a great place to visit early October. Go take a
Yeah,
quick
so your
road trip.
show your show in Chicago is October 3rd?
It's the
No,
5th through
4th,
the 8th, so
5th through the
7:30
8th.
at night on the 5th, 6th, and 7th, and a 3
Okay,
o'clock matinee on Sunday the 8th.
okay,
And in New York, I'll be at the Manor Club of Pelham on November 18th for an evening
uh-huh,
show. So if
great,
you're anywhere in
great,
those areas, come see it.
awesome. And then are you thinking about another Denver show at
I
some
will definitely do another Denver show. I built a comedy club with a nice stage and all
Yeah,
professional lights and sounds in my
yeah,
basement, so as long
yeah,
as I don't get in
yeah,
trouble with the HOA, we're a go, but it seats 52, and I did perform my show down there a couple months ago, and
yep,
so I essentially built my own residency to
yeah,
regularly perform, so if you're in the Denver area, yeah, and just get on the list and you'll be updated about the
yeah.
upcoming shows there, but I'll do that one probably on an every other month basis.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, so good. So fun talking to you. And like to do with all of my guests, I am such a quote junkie. I like to ask people what is an inspirational saying or motivational quote that keeps you going.
Well, I have 2 kinda because 'cause I'm an
Yeah.
overachiever,
Okay.
but when I was a kid, I read a book by VC Andrews. It was The Flowers in the Attic or something. I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
why that stuck
Yeah.
with me, but I
I've
put
read
it on a
that. Yeah.
plaque, and in the book, it said, "Everything can come to those who have the desire, the drive, the dedication, and the determination," and I
Mm.
truly have lived by that one. But my favorite quote for sure is one that I talk about in my show, and it's something that my dad said, and I even used it here earlier today, but it is, "Who chiseled that over the door?" Which is really a response for anytime anyone says something isn't possible, ask yourself and ask them, "Well, who chiseled that over the door?" And then
Mhm.
go make it happen.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Merritt. Where can people get connected to you? We'll have this in the show notes as well, but where's the best place to find out about your shows, your keynote speaking,
Uh,
share some of those.
the best place is my website, which is the hub of all things, so it's meritkahn.com, Meritkahn, and there you'll find on the homepage, it's, click the box for keynotes, theater, or comedy clubs, and I do encourage you, if you're inspired at all by what we've talked about around the show, click that theater button and then, scroll all the way to the bottom, get yourself on the list to be notified about upcoming shows, and I always ask for your city and your zip code because once I see a lot of, you know, followers in that area, then I'm gonna bring my show right to your backyard. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Yay. Very cool. Looking forward to the world tour. And thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Andrea. It was a pleasure.
Hope that was helpful, and make sure you grab the free guide, Top Tools for Late Starters, on the website at latestartersclub.com. And let's turn dreaming into doing.